starting with 1 million luck points. Chapter 481 Two Contracts. Chen Yan's words made Zhou Hao somewhat nervous. Not to mention that this Battle King was an influential figure in the Battle God Battalion, just the fact that the higher UPS of the Battle God Battalion were contacting him made Zhou Hao feel that the whole matter was somewhat unbelievable. After all, he was only a first-grade supernatural expert. He was still far from reaching the heaven realm. Of course, the strength Zhou Hao was hiding was at the quasi-heaven realm. At this moment, it was also possible for him to reach the heaven realm. However, it was still a little irrational for the higher UPS of this Battle God Battalion to want to meet him. Zhou Hao was very surprised. However, no matter what, since Battle King wanted to meet him, then Zhou Hao would just have to meet him. Soon, Zhou Hao and Chen Yan arrived at an extremely hidden tall building. There were few people here, and there were many soldiers guarding the area. It was obvious that this was not an ordinary place. This is a meeting room of our Battle God Battalion. In order to prevent mutated beast spies from infiltrating, one has to go through countless inspections to enter this place. Chen Yan introduced. Then, she took out her identity card and even looked into a camera to verify her identity. She even dripped blood before entering. Zhou Hao also learned how to do it before walking into the tall building. As soon as he entered, he felt that things were different. A modern aura surged towards him, making Zhou Hao take a deep breath and somewhat shocked. Instructor Chen, Student Zhou Hao, welcome. As soon as he entered, Zhou Hao heard an electronic announcement. This intelligent system was quite useful. I won't accompany you up. Battle King has something to tell you. If I go in, I'm afraid I'll disturb your chat. I'll wait for you here. You can go. Chen Yan smiled. After saying this, the electronic broadcast sounded again. Student Zhou Hao, please go to the top floor. Battle King is waiting for you. Zhou Hao was stunned for a moment. It seemed that Battle King already knew that they were here. Zhou Hao got into the elevator and went straight to the top floor. This top floor was very large. In fact, the entire floor was actually Battle King's office. It could be said that there was everything on this floor. There was also a super large training room and an entertainment room. This whole floor was almost 2,000 square meters. When Zhou Hao walked in, he saw a middle-aged man in a tight training suit. His back was facing Zhou Hao, and he was practicing boxing. Zhou Hao walked over and did not want to disturb them. He stood more than 10 meters away and watched quietly. After a few minutes, the middle-aged man heaved a sigh of relief and turned around. The middle-aged man was full of spirit and had a firm expression. He had the aura of a superior. Just by looking at him, Zhou Hao felt an invisible aura enveloping him, making him feel pressured. Zhou Hao, you're here. Have a seat. Battle King looked a little cold and arrogant. However, when he spoke, he did not give off that feeling at all and was very amiable. Zhou Hao did not refuse and sat on the sofa. Battle King smiled and walked over before sitting down. 003, help me prepare 2 sets of black tea. Make mine thicker. After Battle King said this, Zhou Hao heard an electronic announcement. All right, Battle King An. After Battle King finished speaking, he looked at Zhou Hao. Let me introduce myself. My name is Zhen. They all call me Battle King. You can call me Battle King, but I like others to call me teacher the most, Zhen said with a smile. Zhou Hao was stunned for a moment and did not understand. Hehe, this is my personal hobby. Actually, I don't like fighting and killing at all, much less managing so many things. I can't even be bothered to care about the Battle God Battalion. If not for the fact that the Battle Gods insisted, I wouldn't have bothered doing any of this. Actually, I always wanted to pursue my dream of becoming a teacher, preferably a physical education teacher. Zhen's words immediately made Zhou Hao blush with shame. This person sure was good at showing off unintentionally. He was clearly already a battle king, but he still said such things. It was really a little unacceptable. Soon, the black tea arrived. This time, it was a robot who handed 2 cups of black tea to Zhou Hao and Zhen Tian. Zhou Hao looked at this robot curiously and thought to himself that this thing was really useful. Alright, Zhou Hao, back to business. I called you here today because I have something to tell you. As Battle King spoke, he waved his hand and got a contract from somewhere and handed it to Zhou Hao. This is the first contract. Take a look at some of the details. It's about you officially joining the Battle God Battalion. And Zhen Tian did not waste his breath and handed this to Zhou Hao. Zhou Hao picked it up and looked at it, immediately shocked. The rewards given here were really too high. There was a 10 billion yuan salary every year. Not only that, but he would also be allowed to enter the training room in the Heaven Tower 24 hours a month for free. Moreover, he could obtain 100 million points every year. These points could be exchanged for some treasures of the Battle God Battalion. Many other things could also be exchanged with points. Seeing this reward, Zhou Hao was still shocked despite being mentally prepared. How is it? Is it very shocking? Battle God immediately said. Indeed, I'm a little flattered by this reward. Zhou Hao did not lie and told the truth. Haha, we wanted you to feel flattered. If you don't have any objections, just think of it as an incentive for you to sign the second contract. After Battle King finished speaking, Zhou Hao was stunned for a moment. What was the second contract? Moreover, he said that he hoped that the first contract could serve as an incentive for him to sign the second contract. Could it be that this second contract was not a reward for him but a restriction? However, Battle King did not take out the contract and said, Zhou Hao, how much do you know about our planet Earth? I want to know. Zhou Hao was still puzzled by this question. I know that the humans and foreign races on planet Earth are currently in a hostile state. In addition to the spatial rift, various divisions and families also fight the mutated beasts in battlefields like the Sky City, the East Sea, and the Underground World. After saying this, Battle King nodded. It seems that you still know a little bit about the situation. However, what I'm asking is, what do you know about the ancient ruins? After Battle King finished speaking, Zhou Hao was stunned for a moment. He had only heard of ancient ruins and naturally did not know much. Battle King, I really don't know much about the ancient ruins, Zhou Hao said honestly. It's normal for you to not know. This is because these ruins are all hidden. Even some of the divisions do not know anything about these ruins. Only a few organizations know about this. Chapter 482, Ancient Ruins. After Battle King finished speaking, he looked at Zhou Hao and continued. You should have seen those special training rooms, right? Yes. Zhou Hao nodded. What do you think about them? Battle King continued to ask. Very impressive, the technology is very advanced. And Zhen Tian smiled when he heard this answer. It's indeed very powerful, but I don't know if you've thought of a question. Why did we become martial artists after the global mutation? This has never happened before. And Zhen Tian's question was really spot on. Of course, Zhou Hao did not know. Alright, since you can't answer this question, let me ask you again. If one can only cultivate after the global mutation, then how did the ancient ruins we obtained come about? Maybe it's possible that there were martial artists cultivating on planet Earth before us. Moreover, their martial artist civilization was far superior to ours now. And Zhen Tian's words were mind-blowing. He had addressed many things. Moreover, no one ever discussed this. It was as if no one knew. Zhou Hao had also thought about it before. Although he had not obtained confirmation, Zhou Hao still understood certain things. Since the ancient ruins existed, it meant that there must be martial artists in the ancient times. Moreover, those martial artists were even more powerful than the current martial artists. Battle King, I have indeed thought about this. Moreover, I have always believed that there were martial artists in ancient times. After Zhou Hao finished speaking, Battle King An nodded and smiled. No, you'll believe me, but I still want to ask you again. Do you know how many ancient ruins there are that we know of? This question was simply out of line. Of course, Zhou Hao did not know, so he shook his head. I can tell you that there are as many as the hairs on an ox. Even now, we still don't know how many ruins there are. An Gentian's answer immediately shocked Zhou Hao. Planet Earth was only so big. After the humans started cultivating, shouldn't they be able to go anywhere they wanted to? How could they not know how many ruins there were? Battle King An, this ma little curious. Why don't we know? Planet Earth shouldn't have any unreachable places, right? Of course, we might not be able to go to the mutated beasts' territory, but can't we find these ruins in the places controlled by us humans? Zhou Hao was really curious, so he could not help but ask. Hehe, I knew you would ask this. Actually, many people also wonder about this. However, they were never able to find out why. It's actually a secret. However, I'll tell you this secret today. As An Zhentian spoke, he took out 3 photos. These 3 photos were very blurry. In the first photo, Zhou Hao saw an extremely ancient city. In this city, there were countless armored soldiers holding ancient long sabers and spears. Their auras were magnificent. In the second photo, Zhou Hao saw a vast sea. Under this sea, there was also a palace. It was like the underground world and was very mysterious. Especially the few huge statues, it was shocking. This third one was even more interesting. Zhou Hao saw a pair of huge eyes behind some black clouds. They were like suns that emitted a shocking light. If these 3 pictures could be easily edited using software with modern technology. However, for An Zhentian to take them out, it was clearly not edited but something that really existed. These 3 photos are all real. Moreover, they were all obtained by us Huaxia cultivators after painstaking effort and at the cost of our lives. An Zhentian's words made Zhou Hao confirm his thoughts. However, at the same time, he was somewhat puzzled. These 3 photos were really too strange. If didn't say that this was real, you would definitely think that it was synthesized by a computer. However, in fact, it really exists. Moreover, we don't know where it is if it's not on planet Earth. Battle King An said directly. Zhou Hao was stunned. He did not understand why Battle King An would say such a thing. Let me explain to you. These 3 photos were taken by 3 people. They spent a lot of effort to send back the photos. And up until now, their whereabouts are still unknown. Listen carefully, I'm saying that their whereabouts are unknown and they can't be found anywhere. Even their electronic system can't be found. After Battle King An finished speaking, Zhou Hao became even more confused. What did he mean by missing? If their whereabouts were unknown, didn't that mean that they were dead? Do you know about intelligent entities? It is basically the most powerful technology on the entire planet Earth. Once it's produced, it will be bound to its master. Under normal circumstances, it won't be easily replaced, it will collect information about its master. Similarly, it will also help its master. According to the information it gathered and achieve the highest efficiency. To put it bluntly, the intelligent entity is just like a servant. Except that this servant doesn't know how to rest, listens to you completely, and can even complete everything you handed to it. Moreover, we have an intelligent entity central system in the Battle God Battalion. Basically, with this central system, we are able to locate the intelligent entities bound to their masters and even tell whether or not these intelligent entities are operating normally. After Battle King An finished speaking, Zhou Hao could vaguely guess what the other party was trying to say. Battle King An, are you saying that although we can't find those people, we can still tell that these intelligent entities are still operating normally? Moreover, we also can't determine their location, right? After Zhou Hao finished speaking, Battle King immediately nodded. You're very smart. However, you're only half right. It's not that we can't determine the location, but the location is just too far away. It has already exceeded the distance we can locate. Let me put it this way. The range of the central system can basically cover all the planets in the solar system. You should understand now. After An Zhentian finished speaking, Zhou Hao was dumbfounded on the spot. If the central system could not locate the intelligent entities, did that mean their locations had surpassed the solar system? It had to be known that with current technology, although it was possible to leave the solar system, it was still very difficult. Moreover, the cost of leaving was very high. If one could leave the solar system, they would have to prepare in advance. Ordinary carriers would not be able to leave. Moreover, these people who had sent the photos back probably did not use special carriers to travel into space. Therefore, there was only one explanation. They had gone to an unknown place. At this point, Battle King looked at Zhou Hao and said with a solemn expression. Therefore, we finally concluded that the many ancient ruins do not exist on the surface of planet Earth. Instead, they exist in another space-time dimension. This explanation was even more appropriate for Zhou Hao. In other words, it was a special independent space. Chapter 483, Moro Race. An Zhentian looked at Zhou Hao and continued. Didn't know how much you know about this space. This space is also a brand new domain that we are exploring. Moreover, we have obtained a lot of achievements because of this. Just the few known ancient ruins are in such an independent dimensional space. There are still ways to enter and exit these. Some ancient ruins can only be entered. However, once you enter, you will not be able to leave. Even if one is able to enter, they are only able to enter by luck. No one knows how to enter. The people that sent back the 3 photos must have also entered the space by luck. After Battle King finished speaking, Zhou Hao felt that his entire worldview was being overturned. Of course, after learning about the aliens, he could still accept these things. However, now that he thought about it carefully, he still felt that it was very strange. Us humans still know certain things about these dimensional spaces. However, there are still a lot of secrets in these spaces. These secrets are related to a race and a country. Therefore, our Battle God Battalion has also been working hard to break through this problem. And today, this is the problem I want to tell you. At this point, An Zhenhai handed over a contract. This is the second contract. Take a look. Seeing the second contract, Zhou Hao took it and read it. In an instant, Zhou Hao's expression changed. This was a contract that allowed Zhou Hao to enter the ancient ruins. Moreover, the reward was even more generous. It stated that Zhou Hao could obtain everything in the ruins himself. The only thing he had to share was with the Battle God Battalion. Not only that, but the points and rewards obtained from the ruins were also multiplied. It had to be said that this reward was really enticing. Zhou Hao, you don't have to answer me now, but I think you should still consider it. Naturally, you will only be going to the ancient ruins that you can return from. A certain level of safety is ensured, but we can't say for sure what dangers lie inside. This is the information about the ruins that will be opened soon. Take a look again. An Zhentian took out a document and handed it to Zhou Hao. Zhou Hao looked carefully. This was a mystic realm with the code name 031. There were many strange places in this mystic realm. There were also many precious species. These things were all unknown. Most importantly, this ruin had an ancient and powerful civilization. The Moro race. There was also an introduction to this race. The Moro race was a group of powerful mental strength masters in the human race. The people of this race specialized in cultivating mental strength. Once one's mental strength reached a limit, one would be able to control all kinds of things. For example, controlling flames, swords, and even some powerful experts from the Moro race could condense a space with their mental strength to imprison the enemy. Their mental strength was very powerful. Through calculation, a powerful Moro race expert could kill 100 martial artists with the same cultivation. Mental strength attacks were invisible and could only be resisted by some treasures or even one's own mental strength. However, very few martial arts cultivation techniques could cultivate mental strength now. To put it bluntly, the cultivation technique for mental strength had already been lost. The mental strength of this Moro race has always been desired by our battle god battalion. It has to be known that the ability of a powerful Moro race expert to kill mutated beasts is simply incomparable. They focus on cultivating their mental strength. With a thought, they can destroy the central nervous system of your brain and directly kill you. Even if you are very powerful, they can still instantly kill you. And once our battle god battalion obtains this power, it will be even easier for us humans to resist the mutated beasts. Zhou Hao, you should understand what I mean. At this moment, An Zhentian said. Zhou Hao naturally understood this principle. Once one could use such a powerful ability freely, one would simply be a killing weapon. However, Zhou Hao was still puzzled. Battle King An, forgive me for being direct, but I think you know better than me how precious this thing is. However, why are you asking for my help? Not only are many students stronger than me, but there are also many students on the points rankings who are better than me. If they go, their chances of obtaining it will be higher than mine, right? It was really a little strange to let a first-grade supernatural expert go on such a difficult mission. Therefore, Zhou Hao asked. Battle King An laughed and immediately said, "You brat, you're really quick-witted. I originally wanted to tell you later. Since you asked, I'll tell you. Not everyone can enter the mystic realms. When those ancient civilizations established the ruins, they had set up some restrictions. For example, some ruins can only be entered with a cultivation above the heaven realm. And certain mystic realms only allowed supernatural experts to enter. To enter the ruins, we have to abide by their rules. We can't just enter as we please. Otherwise, the battle gods could have just gone to the mystic realms themselves. However, it just doesn't work like that. Even if they want to, there are still some ruins that they can enter. After all, the ancient civilizations are stronger than us and we are still unable to destroy the restrictions they set up. Therefore, we can only abide by them." Battle King An took a deep breath. And this Moro race is even stranger. The martial artists that want to enter need to have at least 1000 points of mental strength. Only those with more than 1000 points can withstand that mental space. Otherwise, if anyone with less than 1000 points enters, they will definitely be killed by the strange magnetic field in that space. When Zhou Hao heard this, he finally understood why Battle King An had asked for his help. Although your mental strength has not been tested, we have all the test reports about you. Your mental strength is very powerful and has reached more than 2000 points. In the entire Battle God Battalion, you are the first to reach this level. After Battle King An finished speaking, Zhou Hao was stunned for a moment and was somewhat surprised. Why did he not remember testing this? Hehe, you must want to ask how we know about your mental strength without testing it. Actually, it's very simple. Heaven Tower. Battle King An smiled. When he said the Heaven Tower, Zhou Hao understood. This Heaven Tower could test one's mental strength. The composition of the Heaven Tower is very strange. Everyone who can enter will condense the same body, but no one knows how much mental strength they will bring with them. Chapter 484, Generous Reward. An Zhentian smiled after saying this. And we gathered this mental strength and obtained the data. According to our calculations, Zhou Hao, you have the ability to enter the dimensional space known as the Ancient Ruin. Only then did Zhou Hao understand that the Heaven Tower had such an effect. After An Zhentian finished speaking, he looked at Zhou Hao. This matter was decided by the battle gods. As for whether you want to enter the ancient ruins or not, it's up to you. We won't force you. However, our desire for you to accept is still relatively high. Moreover, the ancient ruins of the Moro race are still relatively safe. There are tunnels to enter and exit. The battle gods have already learned about the relevant ancient ruins. Otherwise, they wouldn't have made this decision. Zhou Hao nodded. He naturally understood this and also knew what Zhengtian meant. They still wanted him to go. However, the final decision was still in his hands. Battle Kingan, I want to ask what's in this ancient ruins. To be honest, I'm still confused. Zhou Hao had never entered the ancient ruins before, so he was naturally uncertain. Zhengtian pondered for a moment and thought for a moment before saying, there's an ancient inheritance in the ancient ruins. It's the Moro race's divine stone. This divine stone has an absolute mental strength technique. According to the literature, the source of the Moro race's strength is this divine stone. However, this divine stone has always been in the hands of the leader of the Moro race and is controlled by this leader. If you want to obtain the divine stone, you have to obtain the approval of the Moro race. You know that they're mental strength masters. Therefore, some of their inheritances and tests are mainly focused on mental strength. The battle gods speculate that mental strength might be one of the most important factors in whether you can obtain the inheritance. In addition, the Moro race also has their divine tomb. LOL of their previous big shots are buried there. Although they are already dead, their mental strength can still be preserved in the divine tomb. To put it simply, that's also the place where you can obtain some good fortune. Other than that, there aren't many records in the literature. However, feel that since the Moro race had such a high civilization back then, they definitely had a lot of treasures. Therefore, it's still very tempting. If not for the fact that there is a restriction on who can enter, I would even want to give it a try. Zhengtian smiled. He did not seem to be joking. After Zhou Hao heard this, he nodded. In other words, the main thing about these Moro race ancient ruins was the inheritance. It was even possible that these Moro race experts just wanted to spread their civilization and inheritance through the ruins after disappearing for so long. Battle Kingan, I still want to know how many people will enter the ruins this time. Zhou Hao naturally had to ask. This number, I'm afraid it won't be too high. I can tell you this. We currently know that there are almost 100 people who have entered the ancient ruins. There's people from the various divisions, the military, the Battle God Battalion, and even some organizations in the West. After learning that so many people have gone to the ruins, Zhou Hao still felt relieved. After all, he did not want to be the first one. Now that so many people had gone, Zhou Hao was no longer afraid. Battle Kingan, I can answer you now. I have decided to go. Zhou Hao took a deep breath. Whether it was for himself or for Su Ling, he wanted to go. There was absolute good fortune there. If Zhou Hao did not go, he would definitely regret it. Haha, you sure are straightforward. Alright, since you've agreed to go, I'll tell you about the third contract. As soon as Zhengtian finished speaking, he directly took out the third. Zhou Hao was immediately stunned. He thought that there would be 2 contracts, but he did not expect there to be a third. This third contract is the reward the Battle God Battalion will give you after you return from the ruins. It can also be said to be a promise. Take a look. Zhou Hao picked up the contract and glanced at it briefly, feeling even more shocked. First of all, the contract stated that he could directly become an inspector after graduating from the Battle God Battalion. It had to be known that there were only a few inspectors in a region. The inspector could also manage all the special envoys. The contract also mentioned a special position. This position was the council member of the Battle God Battalion. As a council member, one could participate in any auction organized by the Battle God Battalion, participate in the internal decisions of the Battle God Battalion, and could even speak directly to the battle gods. To put it bluntly, those who could enter the ancient ruins would become core members of the Battle God Battalion. As long as one had never entered the ancient ruins before, they would not be considered as a core member. This identity was terrifying. It had to be known that even the Su family's 12th grade Heaven Realm expert was far inferior to this identity. The reason why I didn't take it out just now was because I didn't want this to become a transaction. If you don't want to do something, I would also not want to use money and authority to tempt you. Otherwise, it would be meaningless. After all, we want you to do your best in the ancient ruins and obtain everything you can. You need to be willing to do it, even without us tempting you with benefits. Do you understand what I mean? Battle King said with a smile. Zhou Hao nodded. This was naturally clear. This thing needed to be voluntary. After all, if it was not voluntary, it would definitely not be able to achieve the desired effect. There's only so much to talk about today. We'll arrange for you to go to the ancient ruins when the time comes. I estimate that it will only be about a month or so. Prepare well. After Battle King finished speaking, he collected the contracts after Zhou Hao signed them all. After coming down, Zhou Hao saw that Chen Yan was drinking coffee. When Chen Yan saw Zhou Hao, she smiled, put down the coffee, and walked over. How was it? How was the discussion? Chen Yan asked. Not bad, Battle King asked me to go. Stop. Stop. Chen Yan hurriedly stopped Zhou Hao, making him stunned. I'm not involved in the matter between you and the Battle God Battalion. Moreover, I think that since Battle King chose to see you alone, he must have discussed many important matters with you. Keep these things to yourself. You don't have to tell me. Moreover, it's best that you don't tell anyone. Do you understand? Chen Yan's words stunned Zhou Hao for a moment. However, after thinking for a moment, he realized that Chen Yan would definitely not scam him. After returning to the Battle God Battalion, although Zhou Hao was still thinking of these so-called ancient ruins, he still hurriedly entered cultivation. However, just as he arrived at the training room, he saw a beautiful figure standing at the door. The figure looked as if she was waiting for someone. Chapter 485, Disgrace. This pretty figure was none other than Instructor Chen Yan's student, that white beauty. Jenny. Zhou Hao did not know why she was here, but he still walked over. Hey, Jenny, what are you doing? Why aren't you training? When Jenny saw Zhou Hao, she was immediately overjoyed. You're finally back. I came here to look for you. Look for me. Zhou Hao was stunned for a moment and was somewhat surprised. Yes, I've been waiting for you for 2 hours. I heard that you and Instructor Chen went out. I knew that you would definitely come for training when you returned, so I waited for you here. Jenny's personality was very lively. With her exquisite face and hot figure, it could be said that she was definitely a true beauty. Compared to the women from the east, the women from the west looked strangely beautiful. Their blue eyes, golden hair, and well-defined facial features made them very recognizable. The women from the east were also petite and had a quiet beauty. When Western women and Eastern women stood together, there was a big contrast. One was fiery and the other was gentle. This was Zhou Hao's feeling. What are you looking for me for? Zhou Hao really did not know why this Western beauty was looking for him. Actually, it's not anything important. It's just that the Western students of the Battle God Battalion will be holding a gathering in a few days. I want to invite you to be my dance partner. In the West, this dance partner was not chosen casually. This represented a special meaning. Whether it was a man or a woman, as long as they took the initiative to invite the other party, it meant that they liked the other party. This was also why Jenny had invited him. However, to be honest, Zhou Hao wanted to refuse. After all, he only liked Su Ling. If Su Ling found out that he had become her dance partner, it would be terrible. Jenny, I'm really sorry. I don't really want to participate in the dance, Zhou Hao could only answer like this. Of course, this was also what Zhou Hao was thinking. He was really not interested in the Western country's social gathering. Hearing Zhou Hao refuse so quickly, Jenny's face fell. She had never expected Zhou Hao to refuse her like this. Zhou Hao, do you really not want to go, or do you not know how to dance? It's fine, I can teach you. Jenny said hurriedly. Zhou Hao took a deep breath and was really at a loss. Although what he meant was implicit, some things were still difficult to say. At this moment, a surprised laugh sounded. Jenny, so you're here. I've been looking for you. As soon as he finished speaking, Zhou Hao saw Chris and the others walk over. Behind them were Paul, 2 men and 2 women. Chris also saw Zhou Hao. Of course, he did not care because he knew that Zhou Hao and Jenny were both instructor Chen Yan's students. However, after hearing Chris's voice, Jenny frowned slightly, her expression flashing with disdain. Jenny, came to invite you to be my dance partner for the gathering. I wonder if it's convenient for you. Chris was wearing a formal suit. It could be seen that he had put a lot of thought into the way he was dressed. When Zhou Hao heard this, he heaved a sigh of relief. Although this Chris was somewhat annoying and kept targeting him, he did not expect to be helping him out at this moment. However, Jenny seemed very unwilling. Without looking up, she said, "Sorry, Chris, I can't agree to be your dance partner yet. I'm currently inviting Zhou Hao to be my dance partner. You should find someone else." Jenny's words immediately made Zhou Hao depressed. He thought to himself that Western women were indeed straightforward. They did not even know how to be tactful when rejecting. When Chris heard this, his expression turned ugly on the spot. He glanced at Zhou Hao angrily and could not help but say, "Jenny, are you really going to invite Zhou Hao? He's an Easterner. How could he know how to dance? If he doesn't know how, I can teach him. This is not a problem." Jenny did not care at all. Instead, she would be happier if Zhou Hao did not know how to dance. Because if he didn't know how, it would mean that she could spend more time with Zhou Hao. Hearing Jenny's words, Chris was even more furious. "Jenny, our gathering will probably be held next week. Zhou Hao won't be able to learn it at all. Moreover, this gathering is a very important occasion for our Western countries. If you invite someone who doesn't know how to dance, won't you be embarrassing yourself? No way. So what if he doesn't know how to dance? My father didn't know how to dance before he met my mother. Now they're both good dancers." Jenny said directly, then looked at Zhou Hao and smiled. "By the way, my father is also Chinese." Zhou Hao coughed dryly, not knowing what to say. On the other hand, Chris was simply furious. The few people beside him were also a little angry when they saw this scene. They all knew that Chris liked Jenny very much and had pursued her for a long time. However, they did not expect that not long after Zhou Hao arrived at the Battle God Battalion, Jenny actually had feelings for him. Seeing their companion suffer, they naturally could not sit still. Paul was the first to speak. Moreover, he did not like Zhou Hao to begin with, so he immediately spoke. "Jenny, I don't think you can invite Zhou Hao. He's not from a rich Western family. Let's not talk about whether he's qualified to participate in our gathering. Even if he is, dancing with you is still an insult to your status." After saying this, the 2 white women beside him also spoke. "Jenny, you really should consider it carefully. If you embarrass yourself by dancing with an Easterner who has never participated in a social gathering, it won't just embarrass you, but also your family." "That's right. Our Western countries value our family's reputation the most. I think your family members also won't agree to it. Don't forget that our family gathering this time is not only limited to students. Some of the teachers from the Battle God Battalion will also participate." They all spoke at once, trying to belittle Zhou Hao. Zhou Hao was aware of this but did not care. In any case, he did not want to go to this gathering. It would be even better if Jenny did not invite him. However, Jenny was still determined to invite Zhou Hao. What's there to be afraid of? It's just a gathering. It's not that important. Moreover, Zhou Hao is already famous in the Battle God Battalion. Who would laugh at him? On the other hand, the few of you have been in the Battle God Battalion for more than a year and have been left far behind by Zhou Hao. You're the ones who should be ashamed, right? Jenny did not indulge them at all. Jenny was from a rich family and even Chris's family had to show them some respect. Otherwise, Chris would not be so anxious despite knowing that he was being treated coldly. Chapter 486, Challenge Letter. Jenny's words undoubtedly caused Chris to be on the verge of going crazy. Chris looked at Zhou Hao with fire in his eyes. He had liked Jenny for a long time. Moreover, Jenny's family could indeed help him out, so he really wanted to facilitate this marriage. However, even though he wanted to, Jenny still refused. He was extremely anxious. This time, he had also spent a lot of effort to invite Jenny. Unexpectedly, Jenny actually took the initiative to invite Zhou Hao. This undoubtedly stabbed his proud heart a few times. He really wanted to rush up and beat Zhou Hao up. Jenny, I think we should still consider this matter. You're from a rich family. Even if you don't care, your family will still care. Moreover, we didn't even think of inviting Zhou Hao to our gathering this time. Chris held back the anger in his heart and said directly. This gathering was led by their Chris family. Moreover, as the host of the gathering, he had the right to decide whether or not to invite Zhou Hao. When Jenny heard this, she was very angry and directly said angrily, Chris, I know that your family is the sponsor. Still, what right do you have to stop Zhou Hao from participating? Seeing that Jenny was very angry, Chris was even more furious. However, he still said indifferently, Jenny, don't misunderstand. Zhou Hao and I don't have any conflicts. Firstly, we have a limit on the number of guests we can invite. Secondly, Zhou Hao has just joined the Battle God Battalion and is not a member of our Western country. Therefore it's not appropriate for him to participate. Chris wanted to tell Jenny that he simply did not like Zhou Hao and did not want him to However, he could not just say that. You. Jenny was furious. How could she not know what Chris meant? On the other hand, Zhou Hao smiled faintly when he heard this and did not care at all. Miss Jenny, let's talk about this again. Since they don't welcome me, wouldn't it just kill everyone's mood if I went? Moreover, I know nothing about the gathering and am really ashamed to go. Therefore, thank you for your kind intentions. Instructor Chen is waiting for me, so I'll go and train first. Zhou Hao heaved a sigh of relief and said directly. Zhou Hao Jenny wanted to say something, but Zhou Hao had already turned around and left. When Chris saw this, he was very happy. He immediately said to Jenny, Jenny, since this Zhou Hao doesn't want to participate, let's not invite him. Isn't it better for me to be your dance partner? Our families are very close. We're just ordinary friends. Also, Chris, since Zhou Hao's not participating, I don't want to participate either. Please remove my name from the list. Jenny was very angry. If not for Chris, she would have almost convinced Zhou Hao. Therefore, at this moment, all the blame for Zhou Hao not going to the gathering was placed on Chris. With that said, Jenny left without looking back. Chris was so furious that he clenched his fists tightly, his eyes red. Zhou Hao! Damn you, Zhou Hao! How dare you snatch my woman! Chris was very furious, and Paul also snorted. Chris, looks like we have to think of a way to deal with this Zhou Hao. That's for sure. This time, he has completely angered me. Chris watched as Zhou Hao left, his eyes filled with unprecedented anger. He could tolerate Zhou Hao bullying Paul and even tolerate Zhou Hao becoming famous and surpassing him one day. However, he could not tolerate Zhou Hao snatching his woman. Zhou Hao did not care about this at all. Instead, he focused on cultivation. His current strength had already reached the peak of the quasi-heaven realm. However, the reason why he did not break through to the heaven realm was not because he did not dare to, but because he wanted to temper his body to 100% before breaking through. However, in the eyes of others, they already thought that it was really fast for Zhou Hao to break through from first grade supernatural to second grade supernatural in just a month. Some people might take 3 years to break through to the heaven realm, but Zhou Hao broke through one level in a single month. This speed was really monstrous. Zhou Hao cultivated crazily in the gravity room. He kept panting and directly increased the gravity by 100 times. There was no one else here and he had absolute privacy. Therefore, he could use his actual cultivation. With the help of this gravity room, Zhou Hao could feel that his body, which was already at the peak, was slowly improving. The gravity room is really great. If only I had one myself. Zhou Hao smiled as an unrealistic thought appeared in his mind. Of course, he was just thinking about it. Soon, half a month passed. Other than hunting mutated beasts, Zhou Hao spent his time cultivating in the training room. Now, his ranking was between 80 and 90. It did not seem like much for him to increase his ranking by 10 in half a month, but it was already very impressive. Many of them had not been able to advance much in the past half a year. Now, Zhou Hao had already increased by more than 10 places in half a month. This shocked many people. However, Zhou Hao was still not very satisfied with this. After training for the entire day, Zhou Hao returned to the villa and went to the study. He opened his computer and a lot of messages popped out. Zhou Hao was stunned for a moment and hurriedly opened them. He was immediately confused. These messages were actually all challenge letters. There were so many letters of challenge, and they were all from Western martial artists. Zhou Hao wanted to laugh. The only person who could do this was definitely Chris. Most of them were ranked between 40th and 60th. They were basically all above the 6th grade supernatural level. Zhou Hao looked at these names and tapped his fingers on the table with a smile. Since they're challenging me, I'll accept them all. Zhou Hao's thoughts were very simple. He needed to increase his strength now, and fighting was undoubtedly the best solution. In the virtual space, their bodies were all identical. Although their cultivation levels could not be brought in, it was a good way to train combat and cultivation techniques. Thinking of this, Zhou Hao accepted all of them. At the same time, Chris, who was staring at the computer in the villa, immediately smiled in satisfaction. You actually agreed to all of them. Very good, Zhou Hao. This time, I'll let you know how powerful I am. This matter was indeed arranged by Chris. His goal was to teach Zhou Hao a lesson. Paul also saw this and his eyes were cold. He had stolen 10 billion from me. I'll make him spit it all out this time. Paul undoubtedly hated Zhou Hao the most. Not only did he lose face, but he also lost 10 billion yuan. Therefore, he anxiously hoped that Zhou Hao would make the same mistake he did. Chapter 487 Who's the Laughing Stock? Paul and Chris's cold gazes were filled with ridicule and smugness. They were not afraid that Zhou Hao would agree to the challenge, but they were afraid that he would not. Now that Zhou Hao had agreed to the challenge, this was the best outcome for them. As long as Zhou Hao accepted the challenge, it would be good for them. You actually accepted all the challenges. Zhou Hao, this time, I'll trample you under my foot. Call Fred and the others over. Chris said to Paul, who called everyone over without saying a word. The villa was immediately filled with people. My dear family, Zhou Hao has accepted the challenges. You should have already received the notice that your bets are all 500 million each. Although it's not much, Zhou Hao still agreed. What I want is for you to defeat him. I want him to become the laughing stock of the Battle God Battalion. Chris said with a crazy expression. These people were Chris's friends and also martial artists from their Western martial artist camp. Although they were all students of the Battle God Battalion, there had always been friction between the Eastern students and the Western students. Otherwise, they wouldn't have bullied the newbies into betting with them the moment they arrived. Regarding this matter, the Battle God Battalion usually did not care. After all, both parties needed to be willing for the bet to happen. Zhou Hao wasn't the only one. Such things had happened before too. The reason why the Battle God Battalion allowed this to happen was also to let these students know the limit of their strength. It was also to discourage them and prevent them from getting too cocky. After all, they all thought of themselves as geniuses and would definitely have their noses in the air when they arrived. If this could strike a blow to their arrogance, it would also make them realize their shortcomings and help them cultivate even harder. However, this was the first time the Western martial artists had seen such a difficult bone to chew. Don't worry, Chris. We know what to do. That's right. We'll make this Zhou Hao the laughing stock of the Battle God Battalion. They all laughed. They still did not care about Zhou Hao's mere ranking that was in between 60 and 70. The weakest among them were in the top 60. Moreover, there were a total of more than 20 of them. However, I'm worried that if we do this, won't we incur the displeasure of the higher UPS of the Battle God Battalion? If we disrespect the higher UPS, won't we have to suffer? After all, the Chinese have a much greater say than us Westerners. Someone suddenly spoke. This was also the only thing they were worried about. It's fine. The Battle God Battalion won't interfere in this matter. Moreover, Zhou Hao has already accepted the challenge. Even if they're dissatisfied, they can't say anything. After all, although we were the ones that issued the challenges, Zhou Hao himself was still the one who agreed to them. Asu. Chris was unwilling to give up. This was the rule. As long as both parties agreed, no one could interfere. Soon, the matter had blown up. After all, the challenge was public. Especially after Luo Li and the others learned of this, they were all very shocked. Zhou Hao, why are you so stupid? Did you just accept their challenges? You have to know that more than 30 martial artists among them have already reached the 7th grade supernatural level. Luo Li was very nervous. Even she did not dare to guarantee that she could defeat them. However, Zhou Hao had actually accepted all of their challenges. Song Kun also frowned slightly, feeling that Zhou Hao was indeed a little rash this time. Zhou Hao, are you confident this time? Song Kun immediately asked. No. Zhou Hao did not hide anything. He did not dare to easily bring up his quasi-heaven realm cultivation. However, with his current combat strength, ordinary 5th grade supernatural experts were not his match. After all, his god-slaying art and the 9 revolutions overlord body art were not to be trifled with. Moreover, his cultivation technique was also very powerful. If he fought with his full strength, even if he lost, he wouldn't lose all the battles. Sigh, then why did you agree? Do you know that by doing this, you will quickly become a laughing stock? They will say that you're arrogant. Luo Li patted her forehead and sat on the sofa with her sexy body, feeling very speechless. It's fine, senior sister Luo. I don't care about reputation. Zhou Hao said indifferently. He did not care about this at all. After all, what could their words do to him? I really don't know what to say about you. Luo Li was extremely depressed and glared at Zhou Hao. On the other hand, Song Kun looked at Zhou Hao and said indifferently, actually, this is also a good thing for you. Battling so many different experts will definitely be very useful and will help you increase your strength. If you can persist, you will at least be able to rank in the top 50. Song Kun immediately said. As a 3rd grade Heaven Realm expert, Song Kun naturally knew this. No matter how one cultivated, training would never be as effective as actual combat. It was simply ineffective to only talk about battle tactics while staying sheltered from real combat. Actually, that's what I thought. Without pressure, there's no motivation. Zhou Hao smiled. Hehe, I knew that was your reason. However, I still have to say that you're really too bold. If it were me back then, I wouldn't have dared to do this. Song Kun immediately said openly. Everything he said was true. Even he did not dare to be as bold as Zhou Hao back then. Zhou Hao smiled and did not speak. The next day, the news spread. Everyone knew that Zhou Hao had accepted the challenges of a total of 20 Western martial artists. This matter could be said to have caused a commotion. Even Chen Yan knew about it. You're really persistent. With so many people challenging you, even I am worried that you will go bankrupt. Zhou Hao smiled. Instructor Chen, if I go bankrupt, you have to support me. Zhou Hao made a joke, and Chen Yan also shook her head. However, I still have to say that you have a mentality. After all, if you persist in so many battles, it will indeed benefit you greatly. Moreover, who said that the Western martial artists will have the last laugh? If they become your training dummies, they will be the laughing stock. Chen Yan smiled. Zhou Hao also agreed with her. If they became his training dummies, they would definitely be the ones to become the laughing stock. Instructor Chen, don't worry. I'll make them the laughing stock. Zhou Hao smiled. At this moment, Jenny walked over with an ugly expression. She looked at Zhou Hao and whispered, Zhou Hao, can we talk? Zhou Hao was stunned for a moment. Seeing Jenny like this, he nodded. After finding a place to sit with Jenny, Jenny looked at Zhou Hao worriedly and immediately revealed an embarrassed expression. I'm really sorry, Zhou Hao. I've implicated you. Jenny looked at Zhou Hao. She did not seem to be putting up an act at all. Instead, it was filled with sincerity. However, Zhou Hao was surprised. This matter had nothing to do with her. Why was she apologizing to him? Jenny, this is not your fault. You don't have to apologize to me. Chapter 488 Angry Chris. After all, he was the one who chose to accept the challenges. It had nothing to do with Jenny. Moreover, he did not accept it rashly. He had his own plans. Moreover, even if Zhou Hao hid his cultivation, his chances of winning would still at least be at 60%. In other words, 12 of these 20 people would lose to him. All the money he would earn from those bets also added up to 1 billion. No, this happened because of me. If I didn't invite you to the gathering, this wouldn't have happened. I know that you don't want to participate in the gathering with me because you are worried about this, right? Jenny sighed and was very angry. She really did not understand why Chris would do this. He did not know that his actions would make Jenny hate them even more. This person had failed to woo her and was actually so ruthless to the person he liked. He was really too detestable. Jenny, this has nothing to do with you. I wanted to do this. Don't say that. Moreover, I'm the one who accepted the challenge. No one forced me. However, Jenny had already thought that this matter was related to her. However, Zhou Hao did not think so. This Chris has always been pursuing me, but he's too petty. I don't like him at all, so I didn't accept his love at all. Who knew that he would be so petty and do this to you? If not for me, the two of you wouldn't have fallen out so badly. Jenny's words were really spot on. If not for Jenny, Chris's revenge would not have been so ruthless. Although Zhou Hao understood this, he did not have the intention to blame Jenny at all. What did this have to do with her? Zhou Hao, how about this? I'll think of a way to make them give up on the challenge, all right. At this moment, Jenny suddenly said. Can you actually make them give up the challenge? Zhou Hao was stunned for a moment. Of course, he knew that Jenny's family background was not bad and that she was also very powerful among the Western families. After all, the person the Chris family valued was naturally extraordinary. Although it's a little difficult, I can still do it after obliging to some conditions. Trust me. Jenny immediately said. No. When Zhou Hao heard this, he hurriedly interrupted. Jenny, don't. This is my problem. I'm already an adult and have my own judgment. Moreover, this is my choice. Please respect it. Zhou Hao naturally did this because he did not want to owe Jenny a favor. Moreover, he did not have any thoughts about Jenny. Zhou Hao did not want to use a girl like this. Even if he could not defeat them and lost all his money, he would not care. However, he could not allow himself to take advantage of a girl like this. But. No buts. Jenny, thank you for your kindness. There's really no need. Moreover. At this point, Zhou Hao looked at Jenny and took a deep breath. After hesitating for a moment, he still spoke. Jenny, I only treat you as a friend. I only want to increase my cultivation now and don't care about anything else. I think you can understand me. Zhou Hao did not want to hurt her too deeply. He really could not bear to. Jenny was good to him and wanted to help him as soon as something happened. Moreover, even if she could persuade those people to give up the challenge, she would still have to suffer some consequences. Zhou Hao did not want that to happen. I understand, but... Jenny was very sad. She also knew that Zhou Hao did not have any feelings for her. However, as a girl from the West, she was just that bold and passionate. Even though she clearly knew, she still wanted to give it a try. Jenny, thank you for your kindness. However, can you let me arrange this? Zhou Hao smiled and did not say anything else before turning to leave. Jenny looked at Zhou Hao's back and took a deep breath. She could not help but mutter. I still have to interfere in this matter. As she spoke, she turned around and walked straight to Chris's villa. She pushed the door and entered. In the room, Chris and the others were discussing how to deal with Zhou Hao. When they saw Jenny enter, they were all stunned. Seeing that Jenny had taken the initiative to come to him, Chris immediately revealed a happy expression. Jenny, you're here. Did you accept my invitation? Chris was still filled with fantasies. Unexpectedly, in the next second, Jenny's words almost angered him to death. Chris, I want you to give up on challenging Zhou Hao. After saying this, Chris's expression was extremely ugly. What did you say? Jenny, did you come here because of that Zhou Hao? Chris was furious and furious. Jenny had not visited him in 800 years and had rejected many of his invitations. It was rare enough for her to come, but she actually came because of Zhou Hao. That's right. I think you guys are too much. Zhou Hao is only a newbie. It's really not wise for you to deal with him like this. Chris, if you want to deal with Zhou Hao, wait until Zhou Hao has the same cultivation level as you. By then, you can challenge him however you want. But now, you're only making me look down on you even more. Jenny did not show any mercy, and her words were also very unpleasant. Chris clenched his fists and his expression turned ferocious. Jenny, I don't understand what's so good about that Zhou Hao. Do you really think he likes you? Chris said angrily. I don't care, but I just know that he was treated unfairly because of me. Therefore, I still have to stand up for him. Jenny spoke with an angry expression. You're infuriating. Jenny, since you're on that Zhou Hao's side, I have no choice but to deal with him. I want to see what you can do. Chris was really furious. He had never said such outrageous things to Jenny. However, today, he could not hold back no matter what. Humph, we'll see. Jenny was very angry. As she spoke, she slammed the door. After she left, Chris was furious. He punched the marble coffee table and shattered it into dust. Damn, damn, damn. This Zhou Hao deserves to die. Seeing that Chris was so angry, the others also pitied him. They all knew that Chris was pursuing Jenny. However, Jenny did not have any feelings for him and instead liked another man. Perhaps, there was nothing more unacceptable in the world than this. Chris, what should we do? Jenny's family is a little troublesome. If she interferes, what should we do? Some people began to worry. Chris's expression darkened. It's true that her family is not to be trifled with. However, Do you think that my family is any easier to provoke? Chapter 489 Battling the 59th Place. The next morning, Zhou Hao arrived at the virtual challenge room according to the time mentioned on the challenge letter. The person he was fighting today was Little Robert. He was ranked 59th and was ranked more than 10 places higher than him. However, Zhou Hao did not care at all. His cultivation was only between 4th grade and 5th grade supernatural experts. Zhou Hao could still deal with him. Many people had arrived today. In just 2 months, Zhou Hao had gone from being in the top 300 to the top 100. He was even in the top 70. His opponent was Little Robert from the West, who was ranked at the 59th place. Anyone who saw this would think that Zhou Hao would definitely lose. Although they thought this way, they were still filled with prayers. Just like how Zhou Hao defeated Paul right after entering the Battle God Battalion, no one really knew what the outcome would be. Since then, Zhou Hao had been involved in another challenge. Therefore, their most direct goal for coming here was to satisfy their curiosity. Because this battle was still filled with variables. After Zhou Hao arrived, he directly entered the virtual cabin and waited silently. It was noisy outside as many people came over to cheer. Luo Li, Song Kun, and the others also came. Luo Li looked at the Western martial artists angrily and was furious. Song Kun was the same, but he did not show any emotions. Chen Yan was also here. She had only come to watch and did not think much of it. Regardless of whether Zhou Hao won or lost, this matter was a good thing for him. After all, she had no reason to be angry. At this moment, Chris and the others walked into the training tower. Little Robert had an arrogant expression. Chris, I'll trample Zhou Hao under my foot today and humiliate him fiercely to help you take revenge. As Little Robert spoke, he walked into the virtual cabin. Just as he entered, he saw Zhou Hao lying there with a helmet, prepared to enter the virtual space. You're pretty proactive. All right, I'll teach you a lesson today. Little Robert sneered and walked in as well. Then, he lay on the sofa and put on his helmet. In the virtual space, the two of them condensed their bodies. After Little Robert saw Zhou Hao condense his body, a cold smile immediately appeared on his face. He slowly said with a mocking smile, Zhou Hao, I really didn't expect you to really dare to accept my challenge. Facing Little Robert's ridicule, Zhou Hao did not say anything. Instead, he stood with his hands behind his back and looked at him indifferently. Zhou Hao did not care about such an arrogant and condescending person at all. Unexpectedly, when Little Robert saw that Zhou Hao did not answer him or even respond, his face immediately revealed a sneer. Zhou Hao, I'll trample you under my foot today. I'll let you know how big the difference between the 59th place and the 73rd place is. I'll let you know the difference between a 4th grade supernatural expert and a 2nd grade supernatural expert. I'll let you know that accepting my challenge is the worst decision you've made in your life. Little Robert kept nagging, and Zhou Hao could no longer listen. He could not help but pout and say indifferently. Little Robert, aren't you ashamed of yourself for saying that? Look at you. You haven't improved at all recently. It's been 2 months and you're still stuck at the 4th grade. What right do you have to challenge me? You're just trash. Hearing this, Little Robert's gaze immediately became ruthless. He slowly pulled out the dagger at his waist. Under the light, the dagger flickered with a cold light, making it look especially ferocious. How arrogant! In that case, I'll insta-kill you today and let you experience what true strength is. After saying this, Zhou Hao's eyes flashed. At the same time, everyone outside the virtual space spectated nervously at the two people who had already entered the virtual space. They were all uncertain as to who would win. Hi, who do you think will win this battle? Is it that genius Zhou Hao or this extremely powerful Little Robert? Some people's eyes were filled with confusion as they guessed. Is there a need to ask? It must be Zhou Hao. He's a genius and has extremely high comprehension ability. There's nothing he can't do. I think very highly of him. However, another person could not help but shake his head. His face was solemn as he slowly said, I don't think so. Little Robert will definitely win this battle. After all, although Zhou Hao is a genius, Little Robert's strength is still stronger. In a real competition, geniuses are naturally inferior to people with strength. After all, the latter are still more powerful. But perhaps Zhou Hao can rely on his own comprehension to directly break through at this moment. Everyone was guessing who would win this battle. At the same time, in the virtual space, Little Robert immediately raised the dagger in his hand and stabbed at Zhou Hao valiantly. Zhou Hao's eyes narrowed. He turned his body and easily dodged Little Robert's attack. Robert's expression darkened, and his breathing became hurried. How could this brat dodge his attack so easily? Could it be that his strength had regressed? However, that shouldn't be the case. He had completed a lot of training a while ago. No one should have been able to dodge his attack. The match had only just begun and he was already at a disadvantage. This made Little Robert very displeased. His eyes were filled with coldness as he suppressed the anger in his heart. He sneered and slowly said, Tisk tisk, I didn't expect you to have such strength. I've underestimated you. I didn't use my full strength previously. Now, I'm going to start being serious. After Little Robert finished speaking, he condensed his strength and rushed towards Zhou Hao again. Seeing this, Zhou Hao also quickly took out his saber and attacked Little Robert. A cruel smile appeared on Little Robert's face. Hee hee, Zhou Hao, this time, just accept your death obediently. No one can survive my dagger. As soon as he finished speaking, Little Robert stabbed fiercely at Zhou Hao's heart, as if he was planning to kill him with a single strike. Zhou Hao narrowed his eyes. Although this Little Robert nagged, his methods were still extraordinary. The dagger in his hand was really superb. Countless sharp dagger beams were released at an extremely fast speed. Zhou Hao was unable to dodge in time and was stabbed several times, causing blood to flow out. Seeing this, Little Robert heaved a sigh of relief. It seemed that Zhou Hao had already reached his limit by dodging his attack just now. He was not as skillful as he thought. Chapter 490 Saber Training. Little Robert heaved a sigh of relief, and the dagger in his hand became even sharper. Countless dagger beams spread out, forming a huge net that swallowed Zhou Hao. Zhou Hao looked at this and frowned. He felt that he had really underestimated this Little Robert. Although this person was arrogant, he still had the strength to back it up. After all, there were no weaklings in the Battle God Battalion. There were only experts. This is more interesting. Zhou Hao smiled. The other party's methods were extraordinary, and he could use it to train his own saber technique. Thinking of this, Zhou Hao directly used the Shadow 7 sabers to resist his cultivation technique. Zhou Hao's Shadow 7 sabers could be considered to have reached its limit. This was the limit of this cultivation technique. After all, its level was not especially high. Compared to Little Robert's techniques, it was still inferior. However, Zhou Hao still felt that even if this cultivation technique was not good, he could still use this opportunity to train his actual combat skills. Little Robert became even more relaxed when Zhou Hao fought him. Ha ha ha, Zhou Hao, so you're actually so weak. Your saber technique is still far inferior to mine. I've cultivated my dagger technique for 20 years. It's not something your technique can compare to. Little Robert laughed loudly and was very pleased with himself. The dagger in his hand was ever-changing and endless. Many of his moves and attacks made Zhou Hao's eyes light up. As Zhou Hao prevented himself from being instantly killed, he also imitated the other party's methods and began to learn. Slowly, Zhou Hao's usage of this saber technique became even more exquisite. Although Little Robert had the upper hand, as time passed, he finally sensed that something was wrong. Although Zhou Hao was in a sorry state, he was still on par with the other party. In fact, he was slowly getting out of that sorry state. He was becoming even more familiar and crafty with his saber technique. What's going on? Why do I feel like he's using me to practice? Little Robert had a strange thought. As soon as he thought of this, he was so shocked that he broke out in cold sweat. At this moment, as he carefully observed Zhou Hao's methods and some of the techniques he used to attack, it actually resembled his own technique. Damn, he's using me to train his saber technique. Finally, when he saw that Zhou Hao's methods were somewhat similar to his, he finally understood. Zhou Hao, you're really arrogant. How dare you take advantage of me? Little Robert was very furious. Without saying a word, he directly used his full strength. He slapped his chest fiercely and immediately spat out blood onto the dagger. This is my strongest technique, bloodthirsty dagger. I want to use this dagger to cut off your head. Little Robert panicked. He did not know if Zhou Hao was putting up an act, but he was worried that if this continued, he would lose. Therefore, at this moment, he used his strongest technique and was determined to deal with Zhou Hao. However, to his surprise, Zhou Hao put away his saber and smiled. Little Robert, you've finally discovered it. Looks like you're not that stupid after all. I did learn a lot from you today. As a reward, I want to shatter your head. After Zhou Hao finished speaking, he no longer hid anything. He directly circulated the God-slaying art and the 9 revolutions overlord body art, and his aura instantly exploded. His cultivation instantly rose into the 6th grade supernatural level. This was even under the circumstances that Zhou Hao had been suppressing his cultivation. Otherwise, if he erupted his quasi-heaven realm cultivation, it would be enough to make little Robert think that he had seen a ghost. Powerful physical strength erupted. Zhou Hao's entire body was bathed in lightning. He used the Golden Crow escape technique and directly disappeared. In the next second, Zhou Hao appeared and arrived in front of little Robert. Without saying a word, he immediately punched out. The strength of this punch directly shattered the blood dagger little Robert condensed and hit his body. A powerful force instantly pierced through his body. Under his shocked gaze, his body suffered a heavy blow. How did I lose? Little Robert did not believe that he would lose. Seeing Zhou Hao's powerful strength, he was finally stunned. Zhou Hao wins. The moment little Robert's body was hit, little Robert's mental strength was kicked out of the virtual space. His entire body was covered in cold sweat as he sat up. At the same time, the cold system's voice also sounded in the heaven tower, making little Robert's expression panic. The people outside also heard the results of the competition and were shocked. He won. Zhou Hao won again. How is this possible? Heavens! Be it the Eastern martial artists or the Western martial artists, they were all incomparably shocked. Wow, Zhou Hao won! How awesome! Luo Li was the first to jump up and was very happy. Song Kun also smiled. I knew it. Zhou Hao is a sly brat. He never fights a battle he's not confident in. I actually expected Zhou Hao to win long ago. Song Kun did not know why he thought this way, but when he thought of the two of them competing, he could only see Zhou Hao winning. It was even difficult for him to imagine what would happen if Zhou Hao lost. The expressions of Chris and the others turned cold on the spot. None of them had expected little Robert to lose. It had to be known that he had a 4th grade to 5th grade supernatural level cultivation. Zhou Hao, on the other hand, was only a 2nd grade supernatural expert. There was a difference of 2 levels. How could little Robert still lose? Damn, what's going on? Chris was furious. He did not expect this at all. At this moment, Zhou Hao also came out of the virtual space. Seeing little Robert's dejected appearance, he shook his head and pushed the door open to walk out. Zhou Hao. Zhou Hao is invincible. When the Eastern martial artists saw Zhou Hao come out, they immediately shouted and could not help but surround him. Zhou Hao was in the 73rd place and yet he still defeated the 59th place. He had once again increased the reputation of the Eastern martial artists. Seeing how happy they were, Zhou Hao also smiled. At this moment, little Robert walked out with a pale face. Chris and the others hurriedly walked over. What's going on? How did you lose? Were you careless? Chris grabbed little Robert and hurriedly asked. Little Robert was still in a daze, but he still heard Chris's question clearly. He shook his head. No, I used my full strength and even used my bloodthirsty dagger, but I still lost. How could that be? Chris's face was filled with disbelief. He knew about little Robert's bloodthirsty dagger. Back then, when his cultivation level was similar to little Robert's, he did not dare to resist this cultivation technique head-on. However, he did not expect little Robert to lose to Zhou Hao. Zhou Hao not only did he defeat me, but I also feel that the reason why he accepted my challenge was to train his saber technique. Little Robert said directly, making Chris and the others even more puzzled. What do you mean? Little Robert, tell me clearly. What happened?